Welcome to Go Think About, the podcast where we keep it real, keep it human, and keep it honest. I'm Crystal Hunt, author, health psychologist, and most importantly, your resident curator of ideas worth exploring. Before we dive into today's episode, I'm going to ask you for one small favor that is completely free. Please hit the follow button in whatever app you're listening to the show. It'll help you stay on top of when the new episodes are released, and it'll help me stay motivated to keep on creating, knowing that you are out there listening. Now, let's get to it. Anne of Green Gables, the CBC version that aired in Canada in December of 1985, has always had a very special place in my heart. My mom taped it. Look, if you know, you know. And I was then able to watch it repeatedly. And by that, I mean hundreds of times over the years. I'm pretty sure that show is responsible for my eventual career as a writer. And Anne's obsession with being Anne with an E gets credit to my over-attending to how people spell their names. I think Anne was the first writer I was really exposed to, and Gilbert's advice to Anne of just writing real stories about real people and not a bunch of highfalutin mumbo-jumbo always stuck with me. But the stickiest piece of takeaway advice is a little bit of wisdom from Marilla. Tomorrow is always fresh, with no mistakes in it yet. I think it's the yet that really stuck with me. We know we will make mistakes, and yet you can still throw yourself wholeheartedly into the shiny new day or idea or adventure, even knowing that the mistakes will inevitably appear somewhere along the way. For me, starting something new is always equal parts fear and excitement. The beginning of anything is so filled with possibilities and so shiny and perfect and dreamy that pulling it out of the hypothetical realm and into the real-life world is a daunting task. For those of us who have a fear of things not making that transition from dream to reality with every tiny shiny detail intact and sparkling, for anyone who has ever spent hours and days and years staring down the road of the unwritten future and trying to figure out how things might work, what way something could go, what you want it to be and look like and sound like and feel like to anyone out there who stumbles across it, I think you get it. That feeling of stuckness that comes from having too many possibilities to consider. Too many roads to see down all at once, and not feeling comfortable racing off down a road when you can't see where that road leads. I grew up in a family of builders, and I was always taught to start with the finished product in mind. What are you trying to make? Visualize it, think about it from all angles, and then break it down into smaller pieces. If you're trying to build a house, you need to think about the parts. The roof, the windows, the walls, the rooms, the floors, and then how all those parts go together. And underneath and behind and between all of those parts, there are the systems that make them work together. The wiring, the plumbing, the heat. Once you've figured out what all the parts are and how they all go together, you make your lists of what you actually need, your materials. And only then do you start building the foundation to make sure that everything you're going to build on top of it is stable and strong and has the support it needs. Every decision along the way is based on what that final outcome is going to look like, and you're always working backwards from a predetermined endpoint. And I've always applied that philosophy to my various business and creative projects too. Picturing the finished product, whether it was a video or a book or a workshop, let me work backward and answer all the questions about what the component parts were and what I'd need. Then I'd figure out roughly what order those parts had to be created in so that they'd all actually fit together in the end. Then I'd get to work making those parts. If I was writing a book, I'd need the cover designed first. Once I could see the cover, I knew the genre and the characters and the tone and any other parameters that would contain the project. But when what we're building is a life and not a project, the end result is something that it's really not possible to accurately picture because it's not the end result or the outcome that we're really trying to make, is it? What we're trying to make is all the stuff that happens before we get to the end of our lives. It's the process, the journey, the progress, the experiences, the interactions, the memories, the connections, the joy, all the things that happen along the way to whatever it is that lies at the end of each of our roads. And that, I find, intensely uncomfortable. To me, it feels like staring over the edge of the cliff down to the water with my toes curling over the ledge, knowing that my whole body, yes, is down there in the swirling water waiting for me. And my brain has completely frozen my body, so there's no way I can jump. I mean, yes, I can see that my brain has a valid point. I can't see what's underneath the water, so freezing my body in time and space and forcing me to do a safety check has its adaptive benefits. If we're talking about a real-life cliff and jumping off that real cliff into real water, pausing makes sense. When you can't see what's under the water, when you don't know exactly how deep the water is, or how strong the currents really are, or how good your swimming skills in that particular water are, it is a smart time to pause where you're at and gather more information. Because that pause instinct is what has kept enough of our ancestors alive for you and me to manage to get born and live to our present ripe old age of whatever years we may be. But when it comes to jumping into making real an alternative future you've always imagined for yourself, or a new line of work, or a new creative project, the injuries that might be lurking if we take that leap tend to happen not so much to our bodies, but to our minds and our hearts. The thing at risk is our self-concept, our ego, our self-confidence, our reputation, and maybe even our relationships. Not everyone around us reacts well to change. The sort of good news? Injuries to our hearts and minds are unlikely to kill us. They're more likely to just make us really, really uncomfortable. Now, if we're talking about real-life physical splattering on the rocks or drowning, okay, there's a strong case to be made for not jumping as a way to preserve life. But in the metaphorical sense, if I screw up a podcast episode or get to a year from now and find out no one is listening but my mom, hi mom, or if mean people on the internet are vocal about the 1,000 ways they don't like what I think or say or do or who I am, well, that might be a little or a lot uncomfortable. But I'll still be alive, and I'll either learn to sit in that discomfort or I'll change my actions to achieve a different outcome. At least I'll be doing it from the water at the bottom of that metaphorical cliff, and the mermaid part of my soul does love a good splash about. I even made a sign to remind me what really matters, which I've stuck up here in my studio, affectionately known as Studio C, which is my bedroom closet. Yes, this is an actual paper sign. I cut words out of a magazine and I glued them on a page and I stuck them to my wall. The sign said, "Enjoy the ride and stay alive. It's not complicated." But after staring at it for a while I was testing and getting recording all set up and learning how to use all the equipment properly, I actually changed my mind a little bit about that wording and I chopped up my sign and rearranged the bits. And until next time, I'm going to leave you with these few little words of wisdom for you to go think about. It's not complicated. Stay alive and enjoy the ride.